I did everything for them. Everything. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every worry that my heart squeezed. I was the safe haven, the friendly shoulder, the hand that was always there to support. They called me queen, mother, angel. I believed that. I believed that my love was enough to keep everyone united, to protect them from any harm. But today, when I look back at this house that was once so full of life, I feel only the echo of silence, a silence that screams the truth that I refused to see for so long. Do they remember me? Did they at some point think about how I was? Or was I just the invisible structure that supported their lives, something that is only noticeable when it begins to crumble? I ask myself, at what point did gratitude turn into self-indulgence? At what point did the love I gave become an obligation for them? I've always been there, ready to listen, to help, to fix. But when was the last time someone asked me how I was really doing? Not a hurried, "How are you?" but a look that really sought an answer, a look that saw beyond appearances, that felt my growing loneliness. My house is full of memories, of laughter that now seems distant, of hugs that have become cold. I was the base, the unshakable rock, but who took care of the rock when it started to crack? Who dried my tears when no one else saw them? I wonder if they even know that I'm here, breathing the same air, but living in completely separate worlds. And the worst thing is that I let it happen. I lost myself in the care of others, in my own desire to be loved, to be needed. And now, in this immensity of memories, the only certainty I have left is that, in the end, those who gave the most love ended up receiving emptiness in return. It's a cruel irony, isn't it? A lifetime dedicated to building a home and ending up dying in an echo. Can you imagine this pain? That feeling of being invisible within one's own life? Life is made up of cycles, they say, that we take care of our parents, and then they take care of us, and then we take care of our children. But what about when this cycle breaks? When we care, and when it is our turn to be cared for? Is there no one? I clearly remember the days when I was the force, the energy that moved everything. I made breakfast, tidied up the house, took care of the children, the grandchildren. Birthday parties were my stage, where I orchestrated every detail, ensuring everyone's joy. I felt fulfilled, useful. I believed that this was my purpose, and I fulfilled it with all my might. Every wrinkle on my face, every white hair was a testament to my devoted love. But time, that silent thief, began to take its toll. His health began to fail. His legs could no longer handle the same pace. His vision blurred. His hearing became more selective. And ironically, it was in this moment of greatest fragility that I felt most alone. Visits decreased. Calls became rarer. The excuses were always the same. I'm busy. I have a lot of work. I'll find a way to go soon. And the soon never came. I saw the photos on social networks, the meetings, the trips, all living their lives, oblivious to my stillness. Didn't they realize that my need for care was as great as theirs once was? Didn't the love I gave them create a bond of reciprocity, a duty, a kindness? I tried to speak. I tried to express my longing, my loneliness, but my words seemed to be lost in the air, like smoke. Maybe I didn't know how to express myself anymore, or maybe they weren't willing to listen anymore. The pain of not being heard is a slow poison, which corrodes the soul. And I found myself languishing, day after day, in the vain hope that someone would notice. That someone remembered that the one who was always there for everyone also needed a hug, a caress, a simple, "How are you?" I remember once, when one of my grandchildren was sick, a high fever, a cough that wouldn't stop. I didn't sleep for 2 nights in a row. I stayed next to him, giving him medicine, taking his temperature, singing softly to calm him down. I felt that immense responsibility, that love that consumed me. And when he finally got better, his smile, the tight hug, were my greatest reward. That was what mattered. But time passed, and the roles were reversed in such a subtle way that I didn't even notice. I became the grandmother who needed help, the one who could no longer do everything on her own. And the help I received was, most of the time, superficial. A quick phone call, a hurried visit, a promise that we'll be back soon. I understand that life is busy, that everyone has their obligations. But doesn't a lifetime of dedication deserve a little more attention in the final phase? Do our history, our memories, no longer have value? I felt like a forgotten object in a corner, still functioning, but of no apparent use to others. I saw the house fill up from time to time, but it was always for a specific event, a commemorative date. After the music was over, the food was taken away, silence reigned again, and I stayed there, with my loneliness as my only company. The feeling of abandonment is an unbearable weight. It's as if you're slowly erased from the memory of the people you loved the most. I wondered if they thought of me when something good happened in their lives, if they remembered who taught them to walk, to talk, to love, or if I was just a distant memory, a closed chapter. I felt invisible even though I was present, and worse, I felt guilty for feeling this way, as if my feeling of loneliness was a burden to them. So I kept quiet. I swallowed my tears, hid my pain, and continued to be the strong grandmother they had been waiting for. But inside, I was disintegrating. I wonder if they even imagine the depth of my anguish, if they know that the lack of their affection hurts me more than any physical illness. And then, one day, the silence became eternal. The cough that no one heard, the pain that no one noticed. I didn't want to bother, I didn't want to be a burden. I have always been independent, strong, but the strength is also exhausted. I remember feeling an immense weakness, a desire to just close my eyes and rest. I thought about calling, asking for help, but for whom? Who would I call, knowing that the answer would be a "I'm busy" or a "I'll find a way later"? I didn't want to be another problem in anyone's life. I had already done my part. I had taken care of everyone, and now it was my turn to be cared for. But care never came. I felt so weak, so alone. The last thing I remember is feeling a cold that came from within, and an immense sadness. A sadness for having dedicated my life to those who did not know how to repay. A sadness for having given so much and having received so little. I wonder if they regret it. If, when they found out that I was gone, the penny dropped. If they wondered if they could have done more. If they felt an ounce of that loneliness that I felt in my last days. I don't hold grudges. No. The love I felt for them was greater than any hurt. But the pain of dying alone, with no one to hold my hand, without a last look of affection, this pain is something that no one should feel. I wonder if they will remember me, not just as the grandmother who baked cakes or told stories, but as the person I was, with my fears, with my hopes, with my unconditional love. My story is a warning for people to look around at the older people in their lives, so that they don't let silence and solitude become the soundtrack of their last days, so that the love given is a cycle and not a one-way coin. Because in the end, what really matters is not possessions, but the bonds we create. And I, who cared for so much, ended my journey in a silence that no one dared to break. May my story serve as a reflection. May no one else need to feel what I felt. You know, sometimes we keep so much stuff in here, on the chest, things that weigh us down, that squeeze us, that we don't really know how to put out. It's like having a river overflowing inside us, but with nowhere for the water to go. And I have a river like that. A river of memories, feelings, a lifetime dedicated to caring. I'm just a grandmother, one of those that you may have in the family, or perhaps no longer have. The one who always had a candy in the drawer, a warm lap, a story to tell. I did it. I did it with all my heart. I was the base, the foundation, the safe haven for so many, and I loved that. I loved feeling that I was needed, that my love made a difference in their lives. But things change, don't they? Time passes, priorities are reversed, and we find ourselves in a different place than we expected. And I saw myself in that place, a place where the care I had always offered seemed to have run out, or perhaps never been seen as something to be given back. I decided to tell this story now because I don't think anyone else will listen to me. Or perhaps because it's important for someone to know that someone understands that behind each elderly person, each person who has dedicated their life to others, there is a story, a pain, a need to be seen. I don't want anyone else to go through what I went through. I don't want this loneliness that has accompanied me in recent times to be the legacy I leave. I want you to remember me with love, but also with the truth. The truth that loving so much can sometimes be lonely. The smell of cake baking, mixed with the soothing aroma of freshly brewed coffee, was the soundtrack to mornings in my house. My grandchildren, still with sleepy eyes, ran to the kitchen, anxious for the warm cheese bread that I always insisted on having ready. I remember little João, the youngest, with his rebellious curls and a smile that melted any heart, hugging me by the legs and asking if the cornmeal cake would be the same as always. That ritual, the complicity in the looks, the warmth of his small hands between mine, was what gave meaning to my days. I felt alive, useful, loved. Every crumb of cake they devoured was a testament to my love, and I treasured each one. This feeling of being the center of their universe, however ephemeral it was, nourished me. One day, little Anna, 7 years old, and with an intelligence that already disarmed any adult, asked me why I was always tired. I smiled, a smile that didn't reach the eyes, and replied that it was because I loved doing things for them, that my tiredness was a sign of my love. She looked at me with a seriousness that frightened me, those deep blue eyes, and said softly, "But Grandma, who takes care of you?" That question, so simple and so complex, took me by surprise. At that moment, confusion took over me. I didn't know how to answer. The truth is that I didn't think about myself. Thinking about myself seemed like a luxury I couldn't afford. The fear of no longer being needed, of being forgotten, prevented me from even considering my own need. Visits began to become rare. The calls, which used to be daily, became weekly, then sporadic. I remember my daughter, Clara, always in a hurry with a million things to solve. She called me, yes, but it was always a quick conversation, full of interruptions. "Mom, how are you? I need to go now, work is calling me." I said that everything was fine, that I didn't need anything, even if my voice trembled a little. The fear of being a nuisance was greater than the desire to express my loneliness. She had her life, her children, her worries. Who am I to add one more burden? This feeling of invisibility began to settle in, subtly, like a mist that gradually obscures the landscape. And then came the day when my house, once so full of laughter and rush, began to echo a heavy silence. I was sitting in my favorite armchair, the same one where I had so often told stories and received hugs, and the only company I had was the incessant ticking of the clock on the wall. I looked at the photos on the shelves, remembering every moment, every smile. A lump formed in my throat. Where were they all? Did they remember me? The confusion mixed with the pain, creating an anguish that suffocated me. I felt like a ship adrift, aimless, with no one to guide the helm. This loneliness, which had previously been only a whisper, now screamed inside me, and I had nowhere to run. I wonder if they ever understood the weight of my resignations. They were not just sacrifices, they were pieces of me that I offered. Every no I said to a wish of mine was a yes to one of them. And I believed that this made me strong, indispensable. But this strength, built on the denial of my own needs, began to eat away at me from within. I became a shell, a structure that housed silent pain. The sleepless nights, taking care of fevers, calming nightmares, were stealing my own peace. I saw myself in the mirror and barely recognized myself. The fatigue was not only physical, it was a fatigue of the soul. I began to feel an anger, a deaf anger, which I could not express. And that anger turned into sadness, into an emptiness that seemed insatiable. I felt like a fountain that poured love, but that no one bothered to replenish. My emotional health, let's say she was the first to ask for help. I became a more withdrawn, suspicious person. Genuine joy seemed to have been extinguished, replaced by a constant melancholy. I felt invisible, as if my presence no longer made a difference. And the worst thing is that, in many moments, it was true. The conversations revolved around their problems, their achievements, and I, the tireless listener, found myself increasingly isolated in my own anguish. It was as if I had become a secondary character in the story of my own life. My needs, my feelings, were always secondary. And this feeling of not being important, of not being valued, is a slow poison. It undermines self-confidence, destroys self-esteem. I began to believe that maybe I really wasn't important, that my only value was to serve. This internal transformation, this silent erosion, of course affected my relationships. I walked away, not for lack of love but for fear, afraid to show my fragility, afraid of being a burden. I closed myself in a shell of silence and resignation. The few who tried to get closer, who realized that something was not right, I pushed them away with my own apathy. It was easier that way, it seemed. It was easier to pretend that everything was fine than to face the possibility of not being understood, of being judged. I became a master at disguising my pain, at smiling when all I wanted to do was cry. And this mask, which I wore for so long, ended up merging with my face. I wonder if, at some point, they felt my absence, my withdrawal, or if they simply accepted my new version, the silent and apparently resigned version. And the consequences? The consequences are profound. They are like roots that spread through the soil, affecting everything that grows around them. I became a person who distrusted the affection of others. Every gesture of affection, no matter how small, seemed suspicious to me, loaded with ulterior motives. I wondered if I was worthy of attention, of care. This insecurity, this trauma of having given so much and received so little in return, left me scarred. I felt guilty for anything that made me happy, as if I didn't have the right to pursue my own happiness. It was a vicious cycle of self-sabotage, fueled by the belief that my worth lay solely in my ability to serve. And this belief, planted long ago, blossomed into overwhelming loneliness. I can't say exactly when the change started, or if it actually happened. Perhaps it is more honest to say that I learned to live with my wounds, to heal them over time, with acceptance. There was no great moment of redemption, nor a public apology that erased years of silence. Life, for me, has become an art of adaptation, of finding small rays of sunshine on cloudy days. I began to allow myself small joys, things that I had previously considered superfluous. A new book, a walk in the park, a coffee sitting in a square, watching people move. They were moments that I kept to myself, like precious treasures, because they were the ones that reminded me that I still existed, that my life was not just about caring for others. There were, yes, moments when the pain became unbearable, when the longing and the feeling of abandonment seemed to swallow me. On those days, I allowed myself to cry. She cried shamelessly, letting the tears wash away some of the accumulated hurt. And then, with a slightly lighter soul, I looked for something that would bring me peace, an old song that brought me good memories, a prayer that connected me with something bigger. It wasn't a new beginning, perhaps, but it was a way to move on, not to let myself be consumed by sadness. I learned that forgiveness, when it comes, is more for us than for those who hurt us. It is an act of liberation, of freeing oneself from the bonds of the past. And I've worked hard to get to that point, to forgive myself for allowing this to happen, for having annulled myself so much. My relationship with my children and grandchildren has transformed. We have not returned to the old days. The family dynamics were already irreparably altered. But there was a kind of truce, a mutual acceptance of our imperfections, our flaws. They perhaps began to realize the void they left, the importance of my role in their lives. The visits became more frequent, the conversations a little longer, and I, in turn, learned not to expect more than they could offer. I focused on nurturing what was still possible, on cherishing the moments of genuine connection, however rare they were. I loved them, and this love, it persisted despite everything. But now, this love was accompanied by a new wisdom, a deeper understanding of one's limits and responsibilities. I remember one afternoon, specifically. My eldest grandson, Pedro, came to visit me. He was already a grown man with his own family. He sat next to me, looked into my eyes, and for the first time I saw in him a genuine recognition, a silent repentance. He talked about how I was always there for him, about how he missed me, and in that moment, I felt it was worth it. It was worth the sacrifices, the sleepless nights, my own annulment. Not because I needed recognition, but because I knew that my love, in some way, had left a positive mark on his life. It was a moment of deep peace, of relief that I had not felt for a long time. It was confirmation that, even in solitude, the love I shared was not in vain. And this certainty, this small flame of recognition, was enough to give me the strength I needed to continue. And so, life follows its course, with its joys and its pains, with its encounters and its goodbyes. If my story touched your heart, if it made you think of someone who may be in need of a closer look, a word of affection, I already feel that my testimony was not in vain. Remember that time is a precious commodity, and the moments we spend with those we love are the true treasures of life. Don't let the rush of everyday life blind you to the importance of a simple gesture, an unexpected visit, a sincere, "I love you." Loneliness is a heavy burden, and love, when shared, becomes the light that dispels the shadows. Look at the elderly around you, at their parents, at their grandparents, and see in them not only their age, but their history, their dedication, their unconditional love, and offer your love back, without expecting anything in return, just for the beauty of giving. Because in the end, it is love that connects us, that humanizes us, that gives meaning to our existence. May my journey serve as a reflection, an invitation for you to build stronger, more present, more loving bonds. Share this story, talk about it, and may love always be our greatest strength. I am just a grandmother, but my heart overflows with gratitude for having had the chance to share my truth with you.